that I designed. It was Andromeda Entertainment's um, second second game, um, and it uses your voice. It's a virtual reality experience, and you tone, and the whole experience is designed around meditative and ritualistic principles. So you tone with your voice, and the game knows based on your voice, it can infer your breath. And by knowing your vocal intonation and your breath, it knows more about you on subtler levels than most games do. You know, most games are really only concerned with what your fingers are doing, what you're trying to do, not with your emotional state. Um, SoundSelf was designed to track and respond to your emotional state, and by tracking your breath, now these sorts of peripherals aren't really available in a commercially accessible way yet, but we were able to access that just from inferred information from where you're vocalizing and where you're not vocalizing, which is just a peculiarity about SoundSelf's design. Um, it opens the door for a much, I'll just say, a really different gaming experience. We've had people come away from playing SoundSelf who have profoundly spiritual experiences and compare their experiences either to deep meditation or to more often to psychedelics. Like people compared it to 5-MeO, which is wild to me. More often people compare it to actually that's the drug comparison that we get most often. Ketamine I hear a lot as well. Psilocybin. Um, these sorts of plant medicines are beginning to filter into the mainstream because they have such a profound impact on people's psychology and people's um, spirituality, frankly. So to see that we can have that sort of impact on a person with a video game is really encouraging to me and gets me superbly excited about the future of gaming. But I think in order to design these experiences, we as designers absolutely have to go beyond the fingers. We have to go beyond game pads. We have to go beyond keyboards, and we have to start listening to more subtle aspects of the body. So I'm really looking forward to the day. I don't think we're that far away from it when these biometric sensors are attached to headsets, for example, virtual reality headsets. Because once we as game designers have access to, for example, EEG data or HRV data, heart rate variability, or if we can look into your eye and measure the pupil dilation, and not only pupil dilation, but the blood density moving through the little blood vessels in the eye. I mean, they're already implementing eye trackers into a lot of these devices, and then the next step is just to be able to use that same technology in order to actually get a pretty high definition image of a person's eye. And once we have that, even just with the eye trackers, you can get heart rate from subtle movements in the eye position. But once we have access to that data, you as a game designer can design profoundly transformative experiences, intimate experiences, really, really, really intimate experiences. The trap I see a lot of game designers falling into when they first encounter some of these inputs is using high definition inputs in order to imitate low definition controls that we're used to, binary controls. So, a keyboard is a bunch of binary controls. You're pressing this button, or this button, or this button, or this button. They're on or off. A gamepad, I mean, it has some analog controls, but it's mostly binary. So to use, to get out of binary thinking, I've seen, I'll describe one game that I actually really, really liked, but does the thing that I think designers need to be wary of, but does it in a really good way. And I think as such, it illustrates what I'm talking about here. At Indiecade one year, they had a game that would hook a person up to an EEG and you would electroencephalogram, brain waves. and you would look at a watermelon. The idea is that you try to blow the watermelon up with your mind. And if it detected your focus level achieving a certain level, explosives in the watermelon would go off. And so it would blow up the watermelon. Totally marvelous. But what this does is it takes a really high definition and complex and organic measurement and contracts it into a binary state. Which was really novel in this form because, we're out in the world and there's a watermelon there. It was very visceral. But I've seen a lot of game designers and scientists using these high definition inputs for binary states that just get the player in the same restrictive and often goal oriented and contracted around the ego, the sense of agency mode of consciousness that most games do, but in a less robust way, because the input is just less robust than a gamepad or a keyboard or something is. I've seen that a lot, and what we as designers are invited to do is with these high definition organic inputs is ask a deeper question of those forms of input and see what kind of deeper form of expression is available through them that absolutely would not have been available before. And what levels of intimacy can we have with the player as a game designer, but also invite the player into a deeper intimacy with themselves and with each other through these organic inputs. Another wonderful biometric input is galvanic skin response, which is a measurement of stress. So this is something I have my eye on. I think in about 3 to 5 years, we're going to have a lot more of these biosensor devices available, and they're going to change the way people interface with games, and offer. And what I'm interested in right now is finding and working with the developers who are already thinking that way, so that in 5 years we have a lot of really interesting projects that are already ready to hit the ground. And for now, we can be working in museums and so on. So that's my thoughts on non-ordinary inputs. I focus mostly on biometric inputs because that's an area of particular interest to me. But I'd like to take a moment to answer any questions. Heather, can you field any particular questions?
Sure. There was a comment in the chat about a game. I'm trying to scroll through, but it's going really fast. A game that mocks you for being scared during the jump scare because it has the galvanic skin response sensor on the gun.
Yeah.
In the arcade. That was a comment I thought was interesting. I didn't know that existed. And then clever. We have a question from, I guess it's not really a question. Maybe the word game is misleading because it encourages driving towards a more binary outcome.
Yeah.
Any comments on that?
Yeah, I've transparently, I've struggled with how to define these experiences. I like the word game because it invokes a playfulness, but maybe experience, maybe interactive experience is a better word. We just don't really have a word for this yet. Game, I use the word game because I think it really uses the tools of the game industry. Yeah, Heather, you said there was an actual
question. I have an actual question. Where can game designers go to learn about which physiological inputs we have to work with and how to associate emotional states with them?
Fucking good question. There is so much work on this in the neuroscience community, and in artificial intelligence, people developing artificial intelligence. So I would recommend the primary devices that I think people might have available to them right now are galvanic skin response, heart rate variability, heart rate in general. Those two will use the same device. It's just a different algorithm on how you measure the heart rate. And EEG. Those are probably the top biometric inputs. And if you look at any if you look at any of the manufacturers of these devices, so HeartMath is a really great place to start. Understanding heart rate variability is a really great place to start. And HeartMath is an institution that's done a lot of research on that, and they make it super, super available. That would be for heart rate variability. For EEG, there's so much work out there on EEG, so much research out there on EEG. And understanding the basics of brainwaves, there's a lot of public information about that. And having a more nuanced understanding of brainwaves, I think just takes a lot of experience, or working with somebody who has a lot of experience, because when people spend a career looking at brainwave charts, they just and talking to people while they're looking at brainwave charts, they just get a kind of sixth sense for what's going on that goes beyond, this brainwave means this or this thing. It's a really subtle measurement. So I would definitely recommend starting with HRV and through the HeartMath Institute.
Thanks, Robin. I think this is a really, really good question. So I'm going to try to put together some resources and make those available on our website at some point, just because I think that's such a good question. I'd like to be able to offer some resources to people. There's a few more questions, but I think I'm going to save some questions till the end. And I would like to ask Erin Reynolds of Flying Mauling Studios to kind of dovetail into this, because Erin has some really novel inputs in some of her games, and I'd love for her to talk about that.
Thanks, Heather. And thanks, Robin. That was amazing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Nevermind, which does dovetail very nicely with a lot of what Robin was going to talk about, or what Robin was talking about. I have a little presentation, so forgive the PowerPoint. Oh, actually, Heather, can you give me the access to share? I guess while that access is happening, so I'm going to talk a little bit about one thing that I find really magical. In fact, I use the term magic. Oh, good, I have the power. I'm going to leave it on a cliff note, so you're going to have to find out in just a few seconds. There we go. All right, can everyone see the title page of this PowerPoint slide? Yes, sweet. Okay, so I am actually also going to turn off my camera so that I have the best luck from the bandwidth gods. Okay, great. And actually, one more thing. Let me make sure that you can hear audio. Okay. All right, I think we're good. Okay, so yeah, so I'm really, I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that I find really cool about transformative game design, and something I'm playfully calling sneaky magic. And with that, a high-level overview of how we approached it in our game Nevermind. Ways basically we can combine and use game design to help people transform their lives in amazing ways. So first, I want to step back a little bit and talk about some things that we know, both intuitively and through research, that are just really good, beneficial things for us as human beings to do. So first, mindfulness and meditation. There are so many benefits to mindfulness and meditation. Our ancestors knew it, and today it seems like every day there's a new benefit that's being scientifically validated. Here's a list of just a few. And then exercise. The same certainly could be said about physical activity, exercising, as well as actively learning new things and skills. But there's actually one instance in which people received none of these benefits, and that's when they didn't do them. And when you look at all that there is to gain from these practices, whether it's increased focus or increased chances of living longer and with a better quality of life, or more self-sustainability even, whoops, did I lose my screen? Hold on one second. Can you still see the thing? Because I just got a weird notice. Yes, see it. You see it? Okay, great. Weird. Okay. Computers are strange. Alrighty. So, when you think about, the fact that people don't do these, you have to really kind of wonder why, why did people not embrace mindfulness, exercise, lifelong learning? And these are just to name a few things, wholeheartedly. It doesn't really make sense on paper. But of course, there are reasons that people don't, because many folks don't have a particularly strong relationship with these practices. And for some, it might be that it's just, not appealing. It doesn't seem like a gratifying way to spend time. And for others, there just isn't enough time in the day to engage with them, maybe. They may believe that something that like meditation or exercise or learning just doesn't fit into their schedule. For some, there may be some social stigmas against the practices. They may believe that something like meditation, for example, is kind of weird, or that maybe some people will think that they're nerds for wanting to learn something new. And of course, there are so many other reasons that can cause folks to avoid adopting beneficial practices and habits, not the least of which is personal baggage that they might bring to it. For example, a bad memory of a former attempt at it. So for me, for a long time in my life, I avoided exercise like the plague. Running, I hated it. Weightlifting, no way. And yoga, it's kind of weird. And it was just, exercise was really just not my thing. And this was due to a combination of exercise being just very unappealing to me and a lot of personal baggage that I had built up around it. Bad gym class experiences, a tendency to feel very self-conscious, body image issues, the whole shebang. But that all changed when I was introduced to Dance Dance Revolution. And DDR truly changed my life because it completely changed my relationship with exercise. The wacky music, the candy visuals, the low stakes competition with either myself or others made it an incredibly fun experience for me. And while simply playing the game was a serious cardio workout in and of itself, it provided enough distance from my previous conceptions of what exercise is and the game experience. And that completely reframed how I understood exercise. So for the first time in my life, I saw it as this activity that can be fun and very appealing. And I was so lost in the pure enjoyment of playing DDR that all my personal baggage just melted away. And from that point on, it really helped me build confidence and change my thinking. So now, many years later, I not only still love playing Dance Dance Revolution, I actually genuinely enjoy more traditional workouts as well. And realizing that DDR did all that for me was actually one of the reasons why I became interested in studying and making transformative games. So, in my view, games inherently have this incredible ability to reframe activities and ideas, making them potentially very powerful tools and removing some of the barriers that can prevent people from engaging in healthy, positive activities. And what I have listed here are just a few examples. And there are many ways that game design can accomplish this through narrative, using storytelling to present new perspectives and create context and relevance for the player. And in many ways, storytelling is sort of the OG transformative medium that's been around since the beginning of humankind. And then there's something that's more video game specific, the gameplay actions and mechanics. So architecting what the player is actually doing in the game to compel them to take the desired action. So Dance Dance Revolution, in which you have to move quickly and with accuracy to play the game successfully, is a really good example of that. So there's compelling aesthetics. So there's a lot of power in how something is presented. I think that any topic or practice can feel more approachable or interesting or exciting if it looks interesting, or maybe if it has like an evocative soundtrack. There's extrinsic rewards and immediate gratification. So, when it comes to adopting positive habits, the process can often be slow and subtle, which is kind of a drag. And maybe it can make sticking with it, no matter how profound the results might actually be, quite challenging. So games can assist by providing some immediate gratification and many moments of celebration and achievement along the way, whether it's leveling up or earning in-game achievements, maybe unlocking new content, etc. Things to kind of keep the excitement and motivation ongoing. Then there's immediate feedback. So similarly, games can provide immediate, tangible feedback as to how the player is progressing, especially when it's paired with emerging technology and inputs, like biofeedback. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the context of Nevermind soon. And then social engagement. So, games are such a fantastic way of connecting with others, either, with someone who's sitting next to you on the couch or with a person who's on the other side of the planet, and with them you can compete or you can collaborate. And I think that social connection can be so powerful in providing motivation and confidence and accountability. And, of course, this isn't an exhaustive list by any means, but I think it's the ability to use and combine some of these things that makes video games uniquely well suited to offer positive, transformative experiences. I was really interested in many of these when creating Nevermind. And for those who aren't familiar, Nevermind is a biofeedback enhanced adventure thriller game that my studio, Flying Balls, developed and released a few years ago. And I'm going to talk about it in more depth shortly, but high level, the trick with Nevermind is that when you play it with one of its supported biofeedback technologies, so things like an Apple Watch or a Garmin cardiac chest strap, for example, or even a webcam, the game can pick up on potential indications of feelings of fear and stress and anxiety and respond to those in near real time. And the more stressed the game thinks you are, the more punishing the environment around you becomes. And as you start to relax, the game will become easier and more forgiving. So in this way, I like to say that Nevermind is kind of like a stress management tool in disguise. And the game challenges players to not only become more mindful of those subtle sensations of anxiety and stress, but to also practice and habituate whichever techniques work best for them in managing those feelings of stress. Ultimately, hopefully, helping the player develop skills that will help them become more successful both in the game and in the real world as well. So for a little bit of context, I'd like to show the game's trailer. Hopefully this works, but give me a shout out if it does not.
Rated M for mature.
Lord, I don't know why this is happening to me. I was the perfect little girl.
They have yet to fix us.
I know I'm not alone. I know I can get help if I ask.
All right. So in designing Nevermind, we of course wanted to make a great, entertaining game in and of itself. But as alluded to earlier, the team and I had a handful of other goals in addition to that. So we wanted to help players become more mindful of stress and anxiety responses when encountering intense or uncomfortable situations, as I mentioned earlier. We wanted to create an opportunity for players to practice stress relief techniques on the fly. We also want to raise awareness about PTSD and psychological trauma and destigmatize and humanize conversations about mental health. And, you know, as far as video games go, on paper, that doesn't really sound like a whole lot of fun, you know, in the traditional sense, at least. You know, it's like, do you want to play a game that helps you become more mindful of your stress responses while teaching you about PTSD? That's a really hard sell for a lot of folks. So, you know, here is at a very high level, an overview of how we approach the game in light of our goals and the expected challenges. So first, the narrative is a really important part of Nevermind. It allowed us to frame the experience and discuss PTSD and psychological trauma in a way that hopefully avoided being too didactic. And so, you know, as a quick overview of that, in the game, you play as a neuroprober, which is a fictional psychologist of the not too distant future who works with people who have experienced psychological trauma or PTSD. And specifically, your fictional clients are folks who have experienced a traumatic event at some point in their lives, and their conscious minds couldn't quite process what exactly happened. And so as a result, the memories of the trauma have become repressed deep within the client's psyche. And so it's up to you, the neuroprober, to delve into each client's subconscious mind. And you know, each client is its own separate level to recover those forgotten memories of what happened to them. And so to do so, you end up braving this landscape that's become dark and surreal as these repressed memories have plagued it over the years. And by solving the puzzles and paying attention to every detail around you, by the end of the level, you should have enough clues to reconstruct the narrative of the trauma and successfully release the client or the memory to the client. And then from there, the client can start to work through what happened to them and begin the process of healing. And what I think is key here is the fact that you, the player, are not focused necessarily on helping yourself in the game, but rather helping others. And I think that taking the focus off of the player alleviates some, if any, of the personal baggage that the player may have brought into the experience, which can be quite powerful. And the gratification of feeling like you've helped another person is incredibly satisfying and compelling, which I think helps motivate players to bravely endure some of the more uncomfortable and intentionally unpleasant parts of the game. And maybe they wouldn't have done so if it weren't for that narrative framing. So complementing the narrative, Nevermind challenges players with puzzles and mysteries that enhance and reveal clues that are important to progressing the narrative and story. And these mechanics not only help engage players as invested participants into the story, they also strive to challenge the way players think about the characters in the stories that are told throughout the game. And ideally, maybe shift some of those perspectives or assumptions about trauma that they may have had going into the experience. The visual and aural aesthetics are also a really, really important part of Nevermind. You know, not only are they important to help elicit the desired sense of discomfort in key parts of the game, I think they're also important to reframing how people think about mindfulness and stress management. And so, you know, for example, I would hazard a guess that maybe for some, the concept of stress management and mindfulness is connected to imagery of, you know, new age meditation dens or motivational speakers or, you know, those dang hippies. And, you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with meditation dens and motivational speakers and hippies, but, you know, they may just not be everyone's cup of tea. And as a result, might make mindfulness and stress management seem off-putting for some. And so Nevermind's aesthetics present an alternate take on that by approaching it in a bit more, you know, metal way, which also may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's there for folks who do connect better with that kind of presentation. And then, yeah, Nevermind offers extrinsic rewards through traditional gamey means, you know, narrative payoff, content unlock, etc. There's not really anything especially interesting to discuss there in the context of this, so I'm just going to move on to the much more interesting facet. Last but not least, the use of biofeedback in Nevermind allows for players to see in essentially real time how stressed or anxious they may be at any given time, and when they're able to successfully relax and ease those feelings. So to me, this is important because in real life, for, you know, so many of us, those indications of escalating stress, you know, that tightness in our shoulders, that clenching of our teeth, that you know, growing knot in the pit of our stomach, can be very subtle, and often there are things that we've learned over the years to just ignore, and until, of course, they build up to this incredibly unhealthy point, causing us to lash out at someone or experience serious health issues, which is not good. So, by having the game pick up on potential indications of fear and stress at a subtle level, a level that maybe even the player might not even be able to perceive at first, and then represent that through the game, it can help players become reconnected to those important signals that their bodies are sending them. And then conversely, it gives players real-time feedback on what relaxation techniques work best for them. The player is motivated, through Nevermind's gameplay to respond to any encroaching feelings of fear and stress by calming themselves down, so that they're compelled to find and practice and habituate the technique or techniques that works best for them. So, that could be mindful breathing or visualizations or closing their eyes. Every person is different. And what they find works best in the game will hopefully translate back out into their everyday lives in the real world too. So, that in a nutshell is how we approached it. And we've gotten a ton of positive feedback from players, as well as some data from early academic studies that have been encouraging. So I think there's really some magic to transformative game design, and it may seem sneaky. I like to use the analogy of my mom putting cheese on broccoli to trick me into eating my least favorite vegetable. But I really just think that it's a smart way to use the incredible power that the tools of game design offer, and it makes me incredibly excited and optimistic about the future. And so, yeah, I can talk for hours about this, but I'm going to end things here. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to chat with everybody further.
I didn't get any questions in the chat, but if anybody had any questions for Erin, you can go ahead and drop them here. I got some praise, I got some excitement, but no questions really. I was gonna move on to, let's see, hold on. There is a question. Tim would like to know, are there any standards for biometric data APIs that will make it easier for games and software to support the wide variety of biofeedback devices?
That's a great question. I'm not aware of any, but man, that would be so useful. I think that hopefully there will be soon, because I think that's something that we're going to need as we pursue this path further.
Stephen asked me to see his message above, but I don't see what he's referring to. As designers, let's see. Oh, okay, the user sensorium. I'm going to save that till the end until everyone's had a chance to speak, and then we'll talk about the responsibility that comes with that. I appreciate that question, Stephen. I'm going to have Ashley and Brady pick up now, because I really like to get into kind of the targeting of states and what inspired you to target a particular state, and how you brought that about in your players.
Yeah, so when Robin was talking about novel inputs, and then of course Erin was talking about novel inputs as well, with biofeedback and such. And I would say that in a way of phrasing it, what we actually wanted to do is use novel outputs. And in this case, the output is your body. And then that body, the kind of steering your body into certain actions and positions was meant to affect your state of mind. And the way I kind of came into that, and Ashley's going to talk about how kind of her parallel track and how she kind of had these realizations. The way I came into it was actually a tech demo that I was playing at a VR conference back in 2015. And it was sort of Discs of Tron. I don't know, probably everybody's here has seen Tron, knows what the Tron disc thing is. And it was a VR experience that used a Kinect camera. So it was a full body kind of motion capture particle cloud thing. So there were no controllers. It was just based on body kind of gestures, kind of like how you do gestures with your hands on the touchscreen. It was gestures with your body. And so to throw the disc, you would do like this throwing gesture, and then as the disc would kind of come back, or another player would throw a disc at you, you would block it with like a blocking kind of gesture. And that's really all it was just those two gestures. And I played it for, like 5 minutes or something like that. And by the end of that, I took the headset off, and I realized, like, for several minutes afterward, I felt like this really positive feeling. And I realized it was because I was in these like power poses, you know, these powerful body positions that I guess, you know, feed back into your mind and tell you that you're strong, you know, that, and it's kind of like a verbal affirmation, but in this case, it's a physical affirmation. And I know there's been a lot of research in that, and I wasn't aware of it at the time. And I've seen since then a TED talk that was really interesting about by Amy Cuddy, I think's her name, about adopting, doing things like looking in a mirror, having a power pose like hands in your hips kind of thing, before like for example, a job interview or something. So you stand there and you I think it's like 5 minutes or something like that. You look in the mirror and you'll actually perform better. You'll actually be more confident. And so we wanted to kind of bring that. We wanted to use virtual reality to bring that kind of thing to our players, and make people just feel that kind of positive reinforcement. And so I was telling Ashley about this several years ago, and kind of just saying about how I had this experience and what I realized from it, and then you kind of told me what your experiences have been.
Yeah, you was telling me about that one game, and I said I'm extremely aware of how body positioning can alter your state of mind and your mood. And I had not only grown up dancing, experiencing this in multiple types of dance, and dancing solo, dancing with groups, and feeling that sort of connective energy with other people dancing the same dance that you are. But I also had practiced yoga pretty deeply daily for 12 years by then. And I was very aware of just like the simple moves of opening your chest and feeling more confident and taking on the world, and, you know, closing your chest and you feel like you're protective, and you're a bit scared and fearful possibly, or, you know, not willing to take on as much as you maybe could without it. And yeah, we watched that TED talk after that, and we looked into a bit more of the plethora of research that's been done for this. And we wanted to create something that allowed people to feel those feelings, but not all of them good, not all of them bad, just a space for people to feel whatever they wanted to feel using their body. Because at the time when we started designing Rave Runner, that became Audio Trip, there really wasn't much out there that used the play space as much as available, and used more than, like Robin was saying, just your fingers as input. So we wanted the entire body to be like the controller. And it's interesting, Erin, that you mentioned DDR, because DDR, converse to your experience, was actually something that brought me into gaming. Since I was dancing my whole life, that really was the only game that I can remember really stuck when I was growing up. And it's only in the past like 3 years that I've been diving into all games now. So we saw that as something that could inform us how we design something to allow people to move their body and start experiencing possibly like what I experience while I dance, and something that Brady has always wanted to experience, but didn't allow himself the space to do. Like you told me that you were not a dancer.
Right, yeah, I've never been a dancer. I've always loved the idea, but I've always imagined dancing and you know, letting go and having skill and all of those things. But for all the different reasons I won't go into, you know, I wasn't ever either in situations where I could do that, or in situations where I felt comfortable doing that. And so that was one of the other goals with this, was to kind of create this environment, create a system, an experience that gave you permission to do something that maybe you never gave yourself permission to do before. And it's not just for people like me. It's obviously, you know, she designed it as well, and she's somebody who's danced since she was 3 years old. So it's really for anybody who wants to dance. But one of the things that I wanted to get out of it, and one of the things I wanted other people to get out of it, was basically just giving yourself that permission to experience something and do something that you don't feel comfortable doing otherwise. And I think VR is particularly suited to doing that because of how it, people talk about it being socially isolating, and I don't think that's quite the way to put it. It's more like you can kind of block things out that are not part of what you're experiencing in that moment. And so with this type of a game, you can put this on and you're not thinking about anybody watching you, and you're not thinking about anybody judging you. You're just thinking about, like, I am here right now. And so you have that kind of a sense of presence. You're here in this moment right now, and you're experiencing it, and you're able to devote your entire attention to what you're doing.
Right. And it's not the type of intimidating focus or mandating focus. It's more of a focus that allows you to be more present, because you have those sort of blinders. You can literally dance like no one's watching, the phrase that we all have to use. But I think there is such a stigma around dance, especially. That's why we really wanted to dive into this. And it's been fascinating to see how many of our players have told us, personally or over our Discord or any way that they can get to us now, telling us in all of our reviews, telling us that they always wanted to dance and didn't think they were a dancer. They didn't know how to dance. They felt kind of stupid, whatever it was that didn't allow them to just express themselves. And I'm over here thinking, I truly believe that everybody is a dancer. They just, for whatever reason, have told themselves that they can't. So we were really specific in how we've designed this so far, in allowing the space between the moves, and how I choreograph all of the tracks to, have something that you can just match, and you don't have to really consciously think about it, so you can get in the flow much easier, but doesn't completely restrict your movement so much that you have to do exactly what I'm doing when I dance it through, so that there is that freedom of expression between. And that's kind of where the dance happens. It's the movement between the poses. So
yeah, and so getting that player into that flow state, so you try to keep the difficulty level, or I don't know if that's even the right way to think about it. The cognitive load, you have the cognitive load at just that right point where you have people in that flow state, and that's where their focus is. So we are kind of our first experience, I guess, where we realized we'd been successful in achieving this mental state that we were aiming for, was when we had a tournament, kind of sort of impromptu in a way. It was scheduled kind of at the last minute, and we had this tournament at South by Southwest 2018, I guess it was, and it was on the show floor of the Game Expo. And so we had I forget how many players we had, but we had 4 people that would play simultaneously, and so we would launch all 4 games at the same time, and everybody would play the game kind of in sync. And we had one guy, I think we had to go through 2 rounds. So we had one set of people go through, and then we found like the winner of that one, and then we had like a playoff. So he played twice, and it was 2 different songs. And he made it to the final, and then he wound up winning. Yeah. And he told us afterward that he actually had severe social anxiety and would never danced in public before, and never done any kind of, never really danced. He always wanted to. Yeah, he'd always wanted to dance, but he never felt like he could. And here we are on the show floor of a huge expo, right? So he's most certainly in front of people. Yeah, but it drew quite a crowd. We had like 100 people just watching him. A lot of spectators, yeah. But and he knew that because he got the headset off and waited for his turn for the final, and then went back in. So he knew the people who were standing there. But it allowed him to just focus on what he was doing and let himself fall into that state. And he did so to the point that he actually won, and he was actually dancing right there in the game. And that made us feel really great. That was quite a validating thing to realize, like we finally achieved that goal. Yeah, well, I felt so good for
for him, and it was validating for what we set out to design, because a bit more about my background. In a decade that I spent designing IRL environments of all types, I always wanted to design places where people would feel something that would allow them to change their perspective, or maybe think of something that they hadn't before, that really was toward a way to discover their potential. I really would love to help anyone discover their potential to be their biggest, best self. So now designing this game, that was kind of a motto from the very beginning, to design not only the choreography, but the environments that we particularly designed for each song. They're there to reflect the mood of the music, like everything, the music, the choreography, and the environment all come together to complement each other and to just enhance this sort of ebb and flow of whatever the song is trying to, to say. And of course, that's up to interpretation. It's our interpretation as we design it, but it's the language of the whole design is there so that you can possibly find out something about yourself that you didn't know before. And I feel like that is starting to shine from the feedback that we've received, where they say, like, I didn't know I could move like that, or I didn't even know I liked that type of music until I was moving around and having fun to it, with it. And it's, I think, helping people find their box and then like break out of the box, which is really exciting for me.
Yeah, and that one of the other things too is that we set out to achieve this kind of these psychological and emotional effects in mental states, that we would use both music and movement and visuals to induce. But of course, we learned very quickly, kind of like Erin did with playing DDR, we learned very quickly that this also had fitness benefits and therefore like health benefits. So that's something that we tried to take advantage of, and we really optimized for that. Very recently, we released an update specifically targeted at cardio, and we're very excited about the fitness potential for it as well. So beyond the mental states, at least the mental states that are just kind of related to dance and movement, you also have the fitness and the physical benefits. And we're seeing, quite a lot of success in getting people to do a lot of very intense physical activity that's enjoyable. And it's the kind of thing that you almost don't realize you're doing it until it's over. I know so many times I played through it. I would get to the end of a song or series of songs and not even realize that I was breathing heavily or sweating or something like that until the game was finished and my score is coming up, and I suddenly realized, like, oh, I'm breathing heavily. I was actually working really hard, but right. you don't think about that. And that's kind of a testament to the mental state, that you're getting into that hyper focus and you're just not. And that's such a contrast to like being on a treadmill or something like that, where I know from my own experience, at least, I can say, doing treadmills and that kind of like cardio, it's a test of endurance and patience, because you're just trying to get through it, and you're trying to somehow keep your mind off of the fact that, oh my God, I still have 10 minutes left to go on this thing and whatever. And you're counting down, you're watching the little timer, and you're like, oh, okay, I only got 5 minutes left. And
it's a chore.
It's a chore, and you have to push yourself and motivate yourself to do it. But this is the kind of thing that's intrinsic. You enjoy it intrinsically, and that was one of the things going into it. It was like, this has to be something that people want to do for its own sake.
Yeah.
It's something that people have to derive joy from, just by doing it. And the benefits and all that kind of stuff can come after, and it will come after inevitably. But the focus has to be on the intrinsic enjoyment. So yeah, we're really excited because VR makes so many things like this possible. There's ways to improve yourself and ways to make yourself feel better about yourself and feel more accomplished, without having to like overcome all of these psychological barriers to get there. Right. So yeah, I think that's
I really appreciate that. Every time I play, do I have energy for one more song? Do I have energy for just one more song? And I just go until I can't freaking move anime.
Right,
There's a question on here that I wanted to bring to you, because I'm not sure how to answer it. Do you have any plans on getting rid of the controllers? Because we know we can do hand tracking now. So do we have to hold the controllers for Audio Trip forever?
It's a very good question, one that
yeah.
we have talked about internally too.
It's going to depend on the technology. So right now, for example, with the Quest, they do hand tracking, right? But there are two things that would keep us from using that for Audio Trip at the moment. And that is that the latency is a little bit too high. So if you're having to move back and forth really quickly, there's it's a little behind. But also
and for a rhythm game, that is essential.
Right, but also it only really tracks like up here in front of you. So if you have your arm extended like fully, like to one side like this, the camera can't see your hand. It won't recognize your hand because all it can see is like this kind of angle, right? So it's, it doesn't recognize it as a hand. So it's not really tracking it at that point. So unfortunately, that's not something that will work for the kind of movements and stuff that the game requires at the moment. But I'm very confident. Of course, you have to connect the.
You didn't say the number one reason, which is the first that comes to mind.
What's that?
And until we get.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. Until we get a better interface with the actual computer that we're strapping onto our face for tactile responses, playing it without haptic feedback is dull.
That's true.
It just, you'd be surprised how you really, really miss it immediately.
Yeah, we've done some experiments using devices that don't have any haptics, and it is so disappointing to not feel that connection when you catch something.
You can still make it fun, but if it's kind of like watching a video and then just kind of mimicking, like, yay, I'm having fun while I do it. You can imagine, but having that immediate like haptic response where you feel it in your body, it's more of an enhancement that I think you're engaging with the game. It's the response you need to tell you like you're doing what the game wants you to do.
Yeah, but there is technology on the horizon that's being developed right now that will surmount that and will allow that type of tracking and provide the haptics. But
yeah, I want a full like, Tesla suit.
It'll be much like freer kind of experience.
There's a question in the chat from Brett who wants to know if you've tried it with the Woozer vest or strap. He just says Woozer.
Yes, actually, yeah, we ran into the Woozer guys at E3 one year and had done some partnerships with them. I think we actually did one or two giveaways.
Yeah.
So yeah, we
did a choreography contest, and the one with the most flair in their video, really awesome video that our player sent in, they won a Woozer strap for that. So they're brand new, top of the line elite Woozer strap, whatever it is.
Yeah, the straps and the vests are really great. The vest especially, because it's just so like overwhelming. It's really great.
It's just another way that you can feel the music and the game immediately, viscerally in your body as you move. It's very cool.
I think this is an interesting question, but I don't know if you want to answer it, so I'm just going to leave it up to you. What's the next transformative feature you'd like to add to Audio Trip? Maybe you just keep it under your hat, but that's a good question.
Yeah, so many features we would add. So where do we pick?
Yeah, we have a lot of things.
Because we are still developing a game.
Yeah.
Every day, the two of us are working on it every day.
We have a lot of things we're working on, and we'd like to talk about them, but it's the kind of thing where you don't want to set.
We have to kill it.
Right. You want to set expectations like this is definitely coming and it's not. But definitely, I would say I'll put it this way: we want people to be able to prolong their experience. So like when we first started doing it, we had a lot of feedback initially where people were like, these songs are too long. It needs to be like 2 to 2.5 minutes and no more than that. And we were like, but that's not how long the songs are. But now we have like, what is 7.5 minutes, 8 minutes, which is red.
7.5.
And yeah, red. That's the longest one. And people actually love it. It's like their favorite one. So we found that in practice, people actually wind up liking these really long, much longer kind of experiences. And so we're finding ways to prolong that and kind of cater to that. And I think having that longer term, like being in that mental state for a longer, more sustained period is going to be not just a linear improvement, but it's going to be more than that. It's going to be significant.
And you're right, Heather, it does have that sticky factor. Many of our players recently told us that they play it at least an hour every time they play it. So we want to encourage that and help that.
I'm most excited about being able to build a playlist so I can play Unbroken for 20, 30 minutes. I'm gonna cut you guys off there, and I'm gonna try to have Android introduce himself and go ahead and just speak on his topic, because we didn't get a chance to introduce Android. Are you there, Android? Hi.
You guys hear me?
You popped in a little bit late. You're kind of quiet.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're a little bit on the quiet side.
All right.
So everybody started with an introduction earlier. You may as well just introduce yourself and just launch into whatever you wanted to talk about.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm Android Jones. I live in Colorado. I've been developing with VR and Unreal since 2016, and we have a working on primarily one experience, one product called Microdose VR that hopefully will be. We've had a pretty active alpha and beta group for the last year and a half, and we'll look to be launching it most likely the end of next month. We're going to do like a full kind of a crypto launch with it. The only way to attain Microdose will be through either Ethereum or Bitcoin. So we're kind of excited about that. And yeah, as it pertains to this conversation, I've been working with, we've been incorporating biofeedback into Microdose since around 2017. We work pretty kind of exclusively with the developers of the Muse headband. We've also kind of incorporated another peripheral called a Polar, which is pretty good at getting some good EEG and heart data. And yeah, I guess the things that kind of, things I can kind of, from my information I can offer from my experience working with biofeedback. A lot of times when I hear biofeedback being talked about, I've gone to a lot of different conventions. We did a lot of research into different external devices and how to make it more accessible and incorporate it into the experience. And what I've come across is just a lot of over promises and under delivery, a lot of almost snake oil. I think people use it too much as a buzzword, and I haven't seen a lot of really meaningful or like effective uses of it. A lot of people think it's a great idea and have all these lofty concepts, but I personally haven't observed any significant execution of it yet. Not that it doesn't exist or can exist, but from working with it for 3 years, I just kind of have people manage their expectations. Like it's pretty difficult to work with. The data is often really messy. I mean, I'm saying from experience, we started off with a lot of lofty ideas of like what we could do and how we could interpret it and what we could use it with. And if you're trying to go for anything that incorporating like EEG or alpha or data or theta, good luck with that. I mean, the data is so all over the board, and massaging that data into anything meaningful, I think represents a pretty significant challenge. Because of that, we ended up really just focusing on heart rate and the different kind of data we could get from your heart. The beats per minute, the differential over time, being able to create things that, being able to track that and what we could learn from that. And, honestly, I think with where we had gotten with it, and we still work with it a lot. I mean, what I wanted to do, the value I see in biofeedback, and I think a lot of VR in general, a lot of these kind of advances in video cards and computing, is that, I see that this technology, when I look at like what's it doing for us, or what's the benefit, or what are we gonna really get out of it? I see an overall trend that technology, when we incorporate things like biofeedback, and now that we have the the processing power of real-time graphics and software like the Unreal Engine. In a broad sense, I see an interesting opportunity for this technology to create a digital mirror that can reflect aspects of ourselves that are conscious or unconscious. I think the use of that, the creative application of that, has a lot of profound possibilities in self-discovery and healing. I think any type of meaningful healing involves an introspective deep dive, like an exploration into the self, and having technology that can give us new reflections of ourself in real time. It's really exciting. I think, to be candid, one of the main reasons I wanted to kind of incorporate VR into our microdose experience is I wanted to use this technology to have what I feel like, and what I can say that we've created with some level of confidence is we use the biofeedback of the heart rate to trigger different particle reactions in real time. And I really just wanted to have I think, to become sort of candid, I wanted to go into VR and take acid and like hang out with my heart in a way that I'd never been able to experience it before. A lot of these, your pulse is something really unconscious, and achievement unlocked. I did that and it was awesome. I don't know how to make money out of that or market it or ship it or package it into any business type of configuration, but we succeeded there. We do have an interface. The other application I could see that we've been pursuing with VR and biofeedback, it focuses a lot more on the therapy side, because we realize when you can see the heart rate, and we have different algorithms that measure the difference in heart over time. We use biofeedback. With the way you use biofeedback too, we incorporate it into the haptics of the sub pack. So we feed your heartbeat back into yourself through this this kind of base backpack, and I definitely had some pretty meaningful experiences with that. And we found that we can, the humans are really hackable. We can manually control once we set a standard for the biofeedback of someone feeling their heart rate. We found that we could manually increase the BPM of the heart rate they were feeling in the backpack, and we could pretty dramatically change someone's actual heartbeat by raising and lowering it, that was pretty interesting. I'm sure there's some applications that you could use that for. But primarily our biofeedback research and development focuses on it being a tool for therapists. I think that we've done some studies and we've had some research with therapists using this as just a way of giving kind of an X-ray, another level of resolution of information and data into what's happening in the person that they're giving therapy. If they bring something up, they can see in real time, like their heart rate going up, or if it changes over time. There's some interesting things there, but I think, overall, I think biofeedback's it's interesting. I think it's worthy of, if you think you have a really good idea of what to do with it. I'm sure there's a lot of possibilities for transforming people in meaningful ways. Really, as of late, even before this, I agreed to sign up for this. And anybody that's interested in the human condition, I just got through watching the all 6 of Adam Curtis's new documentary called Can't Get You Out of My Head, and I've been watching it pretty much consecutively since it came out last week. And it goes into just a lot of cause and effect of the human condition, but it focuses a lot on the idea of the evolution of big data and control and power and culture. And there was probably a time where I was excited about, Valve and the idea of biofeedback being incorporated into being more accessible as a technology. I think the fact that it was so inaccessible that any of the experiences we made, someone would have to spend hundreds of dollars on a Muse or a Polar, and there's a lot of friction involved in making it something that's accessible and marketable. And I think my opinions are changing around that. I still believe that there's a lot of potential to incorporate biofeedback into a therapeutic and kind of like one-on-one sessions between practitioners and patients. But, just seeing the trends of where things are going and, Mr. Global's plans and manipulation and exploitation of our data, the idea of like Zuckerberg putting like a biofeedback device into an Oculus, I feel that the liability would far outweigh the asset to humanity if that was incorporated. So at this moment, I think I would not be a fan of that. And I think I would also kind of caution anybody getting into this that wants to advocate for biofeedback to make sure that whatever you're using it for, that it is something where the benefit outweighs the potential for the data that's collected through biofeedback to be abused, because it will be abused if it does. I mean, I don't think we can put, the cat, we can't really close Pandora's box on that once we open it up, and we're probably far too down that rabbit hole anyway. But I just think that the amount of data that can be gathered, I think if you're going to be using biofeedback, I think it's important for it not to be gimmicky and have a defensible argument for why you're using it, and not kind of like Robin said before, something that's just making sort of binary solving puzzles or, navigating through a world. I think that if we're going to get some benefits out of it, I think it's important to really make it count. And if not, to just all of us just kind of be aware of all the implications and consequences that these powerful transformative technologies can have, because transformation, it's a two-way street either way. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome, Android, thank you. You kind of touching on one of the questions that I had reserved for the very end, and since you're the last speaker, I think I wanted to bring that up. The responsibility that comes with greater and greater access to a player's sensorium. So I don't necessarily need you to answer that question, but if somebody has something they would like to say about how you handle that responsibility, or what that responsibility means to you, or where you see that going.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of responsibility. I mean, biofeedback, it's a really, I mean, that's what I'm concerned about now, is that the kind of data that you can get, like, when we interpret biofeedback, we're bringing that as real-time data into Unreal. We're driving particle reactions, we're having it affect the environment or the lighting, or causing different sorts of conditions. We have an experience where you're just always kind of seeing your heartbeat. You're going through this portal that's always generated by your heart. And yeah, there's some interesting and novel things that we can do, that I can do with it with my small team, that are compelling and effective and have been fun to kind of experiment with. But if you zoom out and you just think about that on a bigger scale, it's going to depend on the amount of resolution that a headset can get. But if say you have a headset that's tracking your eyes, and it's you have the galvanic skin response, it's getting your heart rate over time, and in individual experiences, I'm not that concerned about. But when you think about, if you were to take all that data over a few 100,000 users, and then take all that data over 6 months to a year, it's the companies like the Facebooks and Oculuses and Googles that can take all of that data and run it through deep learning algorithms. I don't think we need to make an argument that these massive corporations already have too much of our private data. This would be allowing them like an access of intimacy into our minds and bodies that I just find kind of repulsive when I think about it right now. I think everything that they're doing when you feed these machines, I think part of the patterns and part of the problems now is that these groups are using this data to basically, I mean, it's the kind of thing where when you get enough data and you get enough of these models going on, it gets to the point where I think part of the goals is being able to, the thing about biofeedback was really interesting is you can't really lie about it. You can lie about a Facebook post, you can go to a website, you can do different things, but the biofeedback, it's the type of information when combined with the other choices that we're making and what we're looking at. I mean, just the implications for advertising is terrifying enough, but I think it gets to the point where if all that data was there, these systems are getting to know the decisions we make better than we know ourselves. And you zoom out a few years, I mean, I think that could have really kind of terrifying implications for just the potential of democracy in general. If they know what we're going to do better than we know, why would they even bother asking our opinions about what's going to happen anymore? And yeah, I don't think I want to go any farther down that rabbit hole for the topic of this panel.
Yeah, I understand. I think Robin has his hand raised. Maybe he would like to add to what you're saying. But Robin appears to be frozen.
I just want to comment that can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you a little bit. Yeah, keep going.
I'll kill my video. Can you, is it better if I kill my video?
Generally, yeah.
Okay. I just want to share, Android. I share your concerns, especially when you look at the behavior of, I think Facebook, especially the way they treat our personal data and collate it and use it for massive scale social manipulation. When you combine that with biometric data, it very much concerns me as well. Somebody asked in the question, how as developers do we ensure approach this question of ethics of this? I've thought about this a fair amount. What big tech wants is to network all of the data and to centralize all of it. So if you're Facebook, what you want is a massive amount of data that you can analyze at will and connect to any number of other things, including advertisers and so on. And if you're a game designer, though, you don't have the same needs, the same requirements as a Facebook does. You need your system to respond to the biometric data. And one of my top concerns or top issues I'm advocating for as far as biometrics are concerned is you can just use that information locally. You don't need to save it. You don't need to connect it to a network. And if what you're doing is trying to create, as Android put so eloquently, I think, is creating a mirror, then you actually don't need the data to go out over a network. And if you can contain it locally, then I think you protect against, at least temporarily. I mean, at some point, this is all likely to be networked with or without, a game designer's choice. But for the moment, if you can have it, if you keep it local, then I think that will protect the user's privacy for at least the first 2 or 3 years of this technology hitting the market.
Thank you, Robin.
Who knows?
Have you finished? I was going to ask Erin what she had to say because she's got her hand raised.
Yeah, I agree with all of the above wholeheartedly. What we do in Nevermind is all the data is local in that way, because the game doesn't need to share the information, and as developers we don't need or frankly care what the information is. So it's all on the locals, all on the player's local machine, and it's erased at the end of the session, and that works beautifully for the game. And I think that'll work beautifully for most people. And I think what keeps me up at night is is everything that's been discussed already, and also how that might impact the progression of this technology too, because I fear that the general public's first taste of the use of biofeedback, whether it's neurofeedback or like heart rate or, and any of this biometric data, which as Android said is incredibly intimate, incredibly personal. If their first taste with that is that being abused, then they're never going to trust it, or it's going to take years before that trust is maintained. And that's going to really delay the development of all the benefits that could come from the ethical, responsible, proper usage of this data. And I think there's an incredible amount of amazing things that can come out of it, that when it's used respectfully, when it's used correctly, that I really hope that isn't impeded by people being reckless with it. And unfortunately, trends would show that that's a big risk that's going to happen. So, I think it's very important that those of us who are working with it and are concerned about this set the precedent and set the example as best we can. We're all small entities, so who knows, but as best we can, show how to use it correctly and set the example so that it creates a positive impression and shows what can be done with it, and how it can be treated, this data, and hopefully establishes, sort of the usage of it moving forward.
Thanks for that input, Erin. I appreciate that. Stephen is really concerned about physical integrity, and I think what he means by that is how game feedback can impact you physically, mentally, emotionally, and the sort of consensuality around that. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that, but it starts making me think about how games in general are impacting your physiology in ways that you're unaware of and that the designer is unaware of in general, so that whenever you play a game, it's impacting you physiologically.
I have a short story that I'd like to share, which Heather, you were very, very present for. But nobody else here knows. When we were showing SoundSelf at PAX and other places, we had this bug in SoundSelf that was persistent for a long time. Look at Heather's face if you can. So SoundSelf drops you into a really, really like fucking deep state. You are in a deep, relaxed state, being, basically made love to by all of your senses. And occasionally, SoundSelf had this bug in it that would just have it spontaneously start screaming in your ear, like making the most loudest, most horrible, demonic screams that you could possibly imagine, like horrible digital artifacting, just awful. And it would not only take the player out of the experience and not only hurt their ears as it would, let's say, if you're playing, a first-person shooter or something, because they were in such a vulnerable state. It was a spiritually unsettling experience. So I hope that story elucidates some level of maybe the responsibility that's required when using these tools. I don't have any specific lines of thought other than, don't do that. We made a joke that was based on that bug. We had a joke that we would have SoundSelf detect if you fall asleep, which we could do pretty easily, and then just replace all of the visuals with a picture of a severed head, and then use that sound to wake you up. So we never did make that, and we never will.
It sounds like something I can put into Nevermind, though.
Yes, it does sound like something you can put into Nevermind. Feel free to take that idea. I'm never going to use it.
I guess. Oh, sorry.
Go for it. I don't have any thoughts.
I did have a question that I think is directed mostly at Erin. Why choose to explore the more dark aspects of human psyche in your game? Why did you choose that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, that's specific to Nevermind. I mean, one of the goals I had in creating Nevermind is I wanted to explore the darker aesthetic. I had always wanted to work on a game that did that. And so, and that's my natural aesthetic is kind of dark and and creepy. So I think, it's just specific to the creator in one sense. But also, I mean, one goal with Nevermind was to intentionally put players in these very intense and uncomfortable situations, because life puts you in these intense and uncomfortable situations, and we wanted to kind of set up this scenario that challenged players to, progress forward, even though they know that, behind that door is going to be something really unpleasant, something very nerve-wracking, maybe something, that they may not want to see, and in order to progress in the game, they're going to still have to open that door and go through it anyway, and learn how to recognize those feelings of anxiety and trepidation inside themselves, and learn how to manage them and react to them, and in light of that scenario. Because again, in real life, there's so many scenarios where, whether we're going into a scary job interview, or whether we're going to have a difficult conversation with someone, or so many of these scenarios where we know it's going to be difficult. We're not sure we really want to open that door. We're not sure we want to go through with the next steps, because it's going to be uncomfortable and unpleasant. And having those skills of recognizing that and accepting it, and learning how to manage those feelings is so important to just living life. And so Nevermind is kind of dark in that way, because that's what we wanted to explore in it. But I don't think that, like, just because Nevermind's very dark, and just because Nevermind explores PTSD and psychological trauma and all these really intense topics, that's not to say that that's a direction that all of this has to take. That was just, again, kind of specific to the creator in that instance. The next project that we're looking at is not that at all. And so it kind of explores similar ideas, but not with that heaviness that Nevermind had. And I'm really excited about exploring that side of the coin. Next.
I'd like to comment on that as well. Before I made SoundSelf, long time ago, I made an installation experience called Deep Sea, where a player wore a gas mask that blinded them and basically suffocated them. And my intention was to create as immersive an experience as I could, and I knew that using fear and deprivation, and by that I don't mean just sensory deprivation, but I mean deprivation of things that make you comfortable, like being able to breathe, would shortcut through the I guess what you would call the higher, the prefrontal cortex would cut through the prefrontal cortex more easily than fear is the most effective way to do that. If you want to shake someone off of their sense of, like, yeah, I know what reality is and I'm going on, the simplest and easiest way to shake someone out of their world is to scare the shit out of them. I remember once when I was in college, and I was obviously, as you'll encounter from the story, not very morally engaged in my actions sometimes, or at least not to a very deep depth. I was on a film set, and we had this really realistic looking foam sledgehammer. And I picked up the foam sledgehammer, and we were in the middle of a park, and I just started running at a stranger with it because I thought that was funny. And scared the shit out of the guy, like totally scared the shit out of him. And if I were in Texas at the time, I probably would have been shot. This was New York's, and nobody has guns in New York City. But in hindsight, I remember that. I'm like, oh my God, that's awful. But it worked. It really worked. And I laughed a lot. And as a 34-year-old, I would not do that. Thank you, 20-year-old Robin. When I started working on SoundSelf, part of my intention was I want that quality of immersion that we got with Deep Sea with fear, but I really want to give people a positive experience. And I found, after the few months it took to make Deep Sea, and then the year and a half just fiddling on it whenever it was going to a show, versus the 8 years it took to make SoundSelf, it's much, this is my opinion, but I think it's a lot more difficult to get people into those really, I'll call it a high amplitude state with positive experiences. with a positive emotional affect, providing a positive emotional affect, than it is through negative emotional affect, which our minds are, and our whole bodies really are geared towards orienting towards. And I wonder, Android Erin, if either of you would comment on that, see if you found that to be the case as well in your own work.
What specifically?
Let me compress this into a sentence. It is easier to provoke a high amplitude emotional response with negative emotions. Much easier to do that with negative emotions and negative experiences than it is to do that, to create a high amplitude emotional response with positive. And I'd say not only much more difficult, but much more complex and much more custom to every person. You know, everybody is going to be scared if you run out at them with a sledgehammer, but people are going to have really different aesthetic responses of what makes them feel really alive and joyful.
Yeah, obviously it's easier to get a jump scare than to like harvest a tear out of someone, because it's a more sophisticated emotion. It's like, and they're more powerful factors too. Where, you know, seem like we're more motivated by the fear of pain or avoiding pain than seeking pleasure. Yeah, I mean, Microdose has always been built to be an experience that is meant to complement the vulnerability of a psychedelic mind state. So we've always shied like pretty hard away from that, because it is easy to manipulate. With biofeedback as well, when I was talking with the principle of when we use the haptic the haptic feedback that mirrors your pulse rate to raise or lower your physical heart rate, and the principle behind that's called entrainment. And that kind of works in a similar way. Like it's easier it worked both ways, but it was a faster response. Say if you were at like 8, if your resting was 80, it was easier to slowly increase your heart rate and get a faster pulse and heart rate going than it was to decrease your heart rate. But we had success decreasing our heart rate from like 103 down to 60 once. So it can work both ways. But yeah, it's easy. I think it is easier to rile somebody up than it is to calm them. But the thing is like the scary thing about either one of those scenarios, and what kind of was alarming to us as developers, was just how easy it is to hack and to kind of reprogram someone based off a simple thing as a visual stimulus that's paired with a little this thing on your chest that's just tapping you on your back or on your chest. It's through visual, just through that haptic and that visuals, we can dramatically affect your heart rate more than I think that most people could mentally. You know, I can't just sit here without breathing harder, like increase or decrease my heart rate as powerfully as I can with external haptics and the accompanying the visual synchronicity, which was really important. I mean, just that alone was enough to kind of like give us a bit of pause of like, wow, if we could do this, like what, you know, we're trying our best to scrape by with good intentions and people's best interests at heart in a really naive and idealistic way. Like what is possible with someone that has malicious intent is, you know, I think it kind of gives us pause. And I think, you know, that is important. I think what's important to also realize is that, you know, we're not going backwards anytime soon. You know, we like the creators of Muse, like their biofeedback ecosystem is people have the option to opt in or opt out to have their experience. They can give their data back to Muse so they can learn from that and make better technology. But I think by default, you're actually opted out of that. They have a great privacy policy. And yeah, we can do things. We can work on closed networks with this biofeedback. I think it's important. And I think it is important as this ecosystem develops to have experiences that do act as, you know, kind of a beacon and an example of positive things that you can do with this. But I think I think it's important to have a kind of a sober awareness. It's like with any tool, it's like a tool. You can do positive things or negative things, with the hammer. But I think that it is naive to think that it is not going in this direction. It's only a matter of time before the Oculus has a biofeedback implementation inside of it, because that data, it's just too delicious to the Zuck. I know he just dreams about that, like, oh, what could you do with all that? And Facebook's privacy policy is absolutely atrocious, and there's no sign whatsoever that they have any plans on changing that or appeasing any of the individual users. So I think it's important to just manage our expectations and separate delusion from fantasy of where things are going. Like, they will go in this direction, and as individuals we can kind of do our best and take the time and the opportunity that we have to make things that are meaningful, but just make sure that if we want to be advocates for biofeedback technology, to understand the deeper implications and consequences that we're inviting into this space.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Man, Debbie Downer. I'm sorry, guys.
It's important. Very important.
Zoom call been on last month. I'm just like, I just bring it all down.
But I think that's.
Oh no, yeah, I'll just share briefly, Erin.
I uploaded the Adam Curtis's documentary, like they released it on BBC. I downloaded it and uploaded it onto a Google Drive because it's just getting taken down from YouTube. It's so gapingly woke. There's no way that our techno overlords would want us to have easy access to it. So anyone that's curious, it's a sick park documentary, and yeah, it's one of the best. I think it's his best work. Yeah.
What's it called?
It's called "Can't Get You Out of My Head" by Adam Curtis. He made the Century of the Self back in maybe a decade ago. He's an incredible documentary filmmaker, but this piece is a real masterpiece.
Sorry, Erin, for interrupting earlier.
It's all good, all good. Yeah, I mean, I think that's all really important. So thank you, Android, for really emphasizing that. Just to quickly get back to your question, Robin, about though, like, is it easier to evoke a positive or negative feeling, which is, I think, was part of the question. And I think right now with the tools we have, it's easier to detect a negative emotion or feeling.
You're getting feedback from somebody. Could I just make sure everyone who's not Erin put their.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I think I think it's with the technology we have right now, it's easier to detect negative reactions because with heart rate, for example, which it seems like in some of the discussion we've had is one of the easier metrics there is to understand and use in technology and access. Heart rate and heart rate variability especially is really good at detecting psychological arousal, which is basically how intense a feeling is, how amped up the person is. So like, for example, in Nevermind, we use heart rate variability. And so when we detect a spike in that, because it's a horror game, it's pretty easy to assume that it's a negative feeling. It's fear, it's stress, it's frustration, it's anger, something with a negative valence. But I think that, games, just like any creative medium, can be very powerful in evoking positive feelings too. This positive valence. We just don't have the tools right now that elegantly pick up on joy, on humor, of that kind of thing, like the good stuff. Basically, it's harder to get that nuanced read on folks with the tools we have. And so I think probably as long as the tools are where they are, it's going to be just a lot easier to make experiences that cause that intense physiological reaction than it is to kind of adapt to the more subtle ones and the more positive ones. But I don't think it's impossible, though. We could, still use psychological arousal to pick up on excitement and joy, right? Because that'll cause a spike too. So with the right kind of game framing, a game could be, designed around that with that intent, if that makes any sense. And I think as the tools become more nuanced, like I'm really, really optimistic about the emotion AI development that's happening. Affectiva's technology, for example, we integrated their emotion AI into Nevermind for Nevermind's emotion detection capabilities. And that was really cool stuff to work with. And I think it's along the right path. So I think, moving forward, hopefully we'll be able to see a marriage of this technology with all kinds of experiences, not just, kind of the more jump scary type stuff. But again, I think that goes back to what Andromeda was saying, is that the more fidelity we get in what is picking up, the risk of that information being abused and misused also just becomes exponentially greater too. So it's sort of a double-edged sword of, as the potential increases, so does the risk.
Thank you, Erin. I don't see any other questions that have not been answered or touched on.
I'd like to address something though, just that Shaitan said. I'm seeing, people are being conflicted about developing for the platform, and especially developing biometric supporting experiences for the platform for Oculus, because we don't like the behavior of this particular corporate overlord. We have a joke in our Slack about appeasing the corporate overlord, but I would really like to encourage the people present who are developing, who are creators, to step into the space and create, because if you don't, then there's still a vacuum there. There's still a vacuum of content there, and the people coming in are people who are not going to be creating experiences that, to use a hippie term, but I think it's correct, that raise the vibration. So for those of us who are thinking about these issues, I think it's really important for us actually to step in and participate. And I know that can be a little unnerving at times, but everyone at Oculus is a person. And everyone that we're connected to at Oculus is a person who care. They care about a lot of the same things that we do. The structure of Oculus, and I think Zuckerberg and a few other people have the whole thing geared towards a sort of anti-humanitarian. Grosses me out. But I think that the more people we have in that space who care about this, the more likely we are to gently steer this behemoth, but not only this behemoth, but if Facebook sinks, then the next one. If more to the point, if we don't step in and participate, then we give up the battle. So we have to step in, and that can be uncomfortable. That's my opinion.
Yeah, thank you.
And then there's a fun. Yeah.
Go ahead. You can read the question if you want to answer it.
Yeah. It's just a fun change of subject. Let's talk about drugs. I really love recommending people smoke a little weed before they try SoundSelf. A little bit of indica goes a really long way. All right, I'm gonna give up.
I mean, I have an Oculus. I have these same feelings when I use it. I also feel that the only way to really create the world that we want to, we kind of don't really see clearly, but feel like we want to envision, we have to be part of it. Yeah, when I first couple of times I did SoundSelf and smoked a little weed and did it, I mean, it was just like it was obviously not the same thing as like drinking ayahuasca, but it was a lot of very similar feelings, going through my system.
Mike, yeah, it's amazing how just a little bit of marijuana can make the experience so much deeper, so much deeper. I mean, marijuana and video games go together like peanut butter and jelly, but that's particularly true with these sort of state altering experiences. I imagine that's got to be true of audio trip as well. I imagine dancing in VR is going to be that much more. You'll probably get a deeper soul workout too. I'd like to address roll off asked about is there still space to explore with traditional non-biofeedback games to create transformative experiences? Absolutely. We've got a few people here on this call who are particularly interested in biofeedback, and so we've gone into a little bit of spiral around that. But there's amazing work you can do just with narrative. For me, Journey was a really transformative game because of what it did with kind of connection and mystery. And there's so many board games, non-electrical games that touch on something sublime, in my experience. So, but you are right. We have gotten into a biofeedback portal here that I think really, it's a topic that is so deep, the biofeedback thing is, and we're really just at the beginning of it.
Hi, I'm not sure if there's anything else that came up in the chat while I was distracted, but it looks like you covered it. Okay. Well, we went a little bit over the time I expected. I expected that we would be done by 3:30, and it's now 3:53. I want to release everyone who's tired and wants to go. And I want to say thank you so much to my creators for coming in here and supporting us and educating other creators about what it is that we're doing and why. Anybody who has anything else to say?
This was fun. Thank you so much. This was really fun. And thank you everyone for showing up to listen to it. I'd love to. This webinar was inspired by an article that Heather and I wrote. I think she posted the link to that, but if you'd like to read that, and there's I did a talk on transformative gaming at GDC a couple of years ago and made like a 30-page workbook for it, specifically for game designers. And if you go to that article, you'll be able to follow that link and go deeper into at least some of my ideas here. But I'm so grateful for everyone else here. This was a really, really fun conversation, and I'm glad that there's enough electricity that I was able to join it.
Thank you very much, Heather and Robin and Android and Ashley and Brady for being here. I learned so much and so happy to have experienced this with all of you. Thank you.
Right back at you, Erin. Everybody here that spoke is so inspiring, and it inspires us to keep creating more. Thank you, and thank you for letting us be a part of this, Heather.
Of course.
Guys, see ya.
All right, everybody have a great day. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.